Hello and welcome to Screen Time. Today I'm going to be reviewing Wonder Women, written and directed by Anjali Menon. This film is set in a prenatal center in Kozhikode, and it shows us this journey of 6 pregnant women coming together to kind of discover themselves. It has this coming of age type of texture to it, and it is a feel good film. In interviews leading up to this film, the director had mentioned that it doesn't have a lot going on, that it is a very simple, humble, feel good, happy movie discussing pregnancy and discussing the multiple aspects of what it means to be a pregnant person, a pregnant woman. I heard that this movie stemmed from her attempt at making a documentary. She was researching for a documentary. It ended up being a narrative fiction film. I wish it wasn't, because the film kind of navigates a very tough journey between being a documentary, showing us what it is like in a prenatal center, what it is like to go through pregnancy in India in multiple socioeconomic conditions, slightly touching upon it. And it is also trying to be a fictive telling of sisterhood, of camaraderie, of just happy people coming together and helping each other get through a very pivotal point in their life. The parts in this film that really work are definitely Nadia Moidoo, who kind of shines really well as the sort of in charge of this prenatal center. She plays the role of almost a motivational guru, a sort of like doula type of character, and she does a really good job. Her performance is extremely effortless. So is the performance of Nitya Menon and Padma Priya. These 3 women kind of really fit into this genre of a movie where you really feel like they're just behaving in time and space. They don't seem to be acting, and that really works for this sort of making. Another really interesting part of the film is how they've sort of touched upon multiple archetypes of women that you might meet in India. Out of the 6 pregnant women, one is somebody who's going through a divorce, one is a pregnant person who's in a live-in relationship, one is somebody from a traditional Tamil family, one is from a middle-class Marathi household. And you see this sort of variety. We even have a low middle class Malayali woman and her security guard husband and their relationship, which is also very tender, and their second child and that pregnancy. So they discuss multiple archetypes, which when I first heard about this film coming out, for me as a feminist, as somebody who is a creative person, I was quite concerned about how will they archetype a nice variety of women without playing into stereotypes. And they have done a pretty decent job at that. They do show us that, hey, there are women like this, there are women like this, there are women like this, without sticking to the conditioning that we're used to. In terms of, the biggest example I can think about is the character of Veni, played by Padma Priya, and the character of her mother-in-law, played by Radha Gomati. They have an interesting relationship. You see it start off as a stereotypical Tamil household where, they're at the dinner table or the breakfast table and you see idlis served with a side of misogyny. And that is the typical scene. But it breaks through that. The mother-in-law stands up for the daughter-in-law. The daughter-in-law, in the end, becomes a sort of hero character rescuing the day with her, occupation of a lawyer. So that's interesting. She doesn't just remain within the blocks of being a Tamil household wife. She kind of steps out of that and in, and that is interesting. How they have managed, how Anjali Menon specifically has managed to give us an insight into different kinds of women without blocking them into different stereotypes. But not always. Certain bits of it is quite stereotypical in the sense of, let's say, there's a character of a hippie singer who lives with her partner in Goa. She at one point says, you know me, I'm a rebel, and then something along those lines. Those parts really kind of hit too much on the nose, and it took me out of the film, at multiple points. Other points when I was taken out of the film was when visual metaphors, like constantly looking at flowers. We have a visual metaphor of Nitya Menon's character holding a Russian doll set where one woman comes out of another woman. Now, these sequences are very on the nose and perhaps could have been avoided, considering the movie is already so, loudly articulating its politics and its point. Parts of this film that did not work for me at all were definitely the sort of treatment of the film, the camera work, the sound design. Something about it felt very much like an extended advertisement, perhaps of like a lifestyle brand like Dove, or like a sanitary napkin ad where you see women just being frolicking around, happy, go lucky. Nothing goes wrong in that world. They're presenting a very clean, optimistic picture of what this experience can be. And the camera really aids in that process. Every scene that you see in the prenatal center is way too beautiful, way too well calculated. The women all look nearly perfect in their own kind of rawness. And that didn't work for me because when I went in to watch a film by Anjali Menon, I think I expected a little more depth. I wanted more depth in the storytelling. I wanted more depth in the camera work. I wanted more depth in just the cinematic experience. At some points, this film just felt superficial. And that really, it was hard to digest because as a feminist, as somebody who wants the community and this ideology to be represented in mainstream Malayalam cinema, I want more. I cannot settle for a happy-go-lucky, very sort of perfect imagery of the condition of being a woman. And again, it's a very gendered experience. They do show us what a typical female identifying person's experience is of pregnancy, of reality, of all of that. They don't really discuss or touch upon how gender is a spectrum and none of that. But I get that. Not every conversation can be had within 1 hour, 20-minute film. But they've tried. It's a really, really earnest attempt. It's a really warm attempt. And I can't imagine, I'm sure the set was a really fun time to see all these powerful, exciting characters and women come together to tell stories about women. That must have been a ball of a time, but that's not enough, that's not enough for an exciting, engaging cinematic experience. I really wanted more. Another thing that really ticked me off was the sound design. Again, it's by Govind Vasantha, so I go in expecting a lot more than just at certain points you have these instrumental sequences set to very long montages, nearly a minute-long montages of multiple, events happening in the film. And the music almost feels like the kind of copyright music that you would download off the internet. And all those sequences really feel, not like a movie, not like a movie by Anjali Menon, let alone. It feels like a YouTube video or it feels like an advertisement. That was very disappointing. Another thing that really worked for me in this film is the language. I am very glad that urban India is being represented in this sort of a way. And I hope more filmmakers kind of take tune because this sort of bilingual, trilingual filmmaking where English or Hindi or, all of these other languages that we use as a common point is the primary language of expression. It is interesting because I think a wider audience can maybe relate to it. Definitely the audience that are part of urban India. And you can kind of tell those stories. People like me, I feel represented, when I watch that film in terms of the kind of way they speak, the kind of words they're choosing, or the kind of body language and all of that, I personally could identify with in the women in the movie. Another interesting thing about the film is the fact that it is told from a female gaze. It doesn't fetishize the women's bodies at any point, which I enjoyed. I like that there's one sequence where you see these women playing, with their feet in the water. And you're seeing kind of cut shots of their legs. But at no point does it feel kind of odd or voyeuristic. It feels like somebody, it feels innocent. Something about those sort of shots of their bodies feel very innocent. The same way there is a long sequence of these women kind of coming in front of a mirror and they're looking at their own bodies. Now, when we see pregnant women represented in a lot of visual media, there is that extremely romanticized shot of like a pregnant woman holding her belly, enjoying it with like sunlight in the background, which it does touch upon that, but this one sequence of these women in front of the mirror didn't have that sort of romanticizing. It just looked like the women were enjoying themselves, enjoying their own body. And you're seeing this entire story from the perspective of the pregnant woman and not the people kind of watching the pregnant woman be, in time and space. And that is really exciting because I think that's a quality that only can come out when women are telling women's stories after, a certain extent. Another thing I really enjoyed in the film are the men. The men written by women, as always, are just more gentle, they're more lovable, they're more vulnerable, and they're more tolerable, honestly. I love that even the character of, let's say, Veni's husband, who does have a sort of negative touch in the beginning, we do see why he is the way he is in subtle dialogues. And even the character of the Marathi couple, where Jaya, the wife, and her husband Umesh, they also have a very tender relationship. And the man, he's a good man, right? Like, quote unquote, good man, respectable men. And they're all tender and vulnerable in their own ways, which I really enjoyed. However, which takes me back to the same point, as I said in the beginning, that they're all oversimplified. Everything in this movie is oversimplified, including the experience of being a woman who's pregnant, including men who engage with people who are pregnant. All of these things kind of, it feels like a superficial telling of the female experience, and that really, really disappoints me as a viewer. And again, as a woman who's wanting stories to be represented, if we are going to go ahead and do this sort of on the nose political films which are trying to make a point, let's do it better. Let's give it more depth. Let's write our characters in more interesting ways. Because this movie does have that. They are interesting characters and they are like a character description exercise almost. But there's too many of them that you don't really see the depth and the grayness or the black and white or any of it of each of those characters. You just see a little bit of all of them, and then they all have immediate issues which have immediate resolutions. And life doesn't work like that, you know. So this film, for me, in conclusion, really felt, which I enjoyed watching at certain points, but it didn't really strike the kind of chord that I expect an Anjali Menon movie to strike with me emotionally. And that was my, 2 cents about the film. I hope we can keep this conversation going, and please go watch Wonder Women on Sony Live. They're streaming today onward. And that's about it. I'll see you for the next one. Thank you.